Is Europe a sucker for the United States? This is the World Brief with me, Aaron Dahmen, and your week in 10 minutes starts now.
Relations between the United States and Europe have deteriorated.
The US will remain Europe's partner and ally, but Europe needs to adapt to new realities.
Europe has gone woke. Europe is not recognizable when you go into so many places.
We will always stay together. North America, Canada, the United States and the European NATO countries always staying together. But Europeans taking more responsibility for the defense of this part of NATO.
We have been and will remain a loyal ally of America, but we cannot be suckers.
Nie możemy być frajerami.
And here to brief us tonight is our correspondent Kazimierz Słyszak, who was in the room during Deputy Prime Minister Sikorski's address. Kazimierz, welcome to the programme. So are we seeing Poland turn away from the United States?
Hello, Aaron. So, as we've heard, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Poland, Radosław Sikorski, in his speech, say that we can't be a sucker when it comes to relations with the United States. That was probably the strongest quote in this entire speech. And to be honest, the speech itself was very much about relations with the United States, a big part of it. And he did say that the US will continue to be our most important ally. He made a very clear point at that. But at the same time, he did use these words. So, he is clearly saying that we can no longer ignore the approach of the United States itself.
So it's not a turn away, but instead Minister Sikorski is basically telling Donald Trump, look, you're the problem in this relationship.
Exactly. And immediately after the speech, I had a chance to ask a question to the Polish Foreign Minister at a press conference. So I asked him if he could clarify the comment, specifically the comment about Poland and Europe not being a sucker. And he said very briefly one sentence. I think it speaks for itself. So we gave him an opportunity to sort of soften the blow, but he did not take it. He assumed that, well, right now we have to no longer pretend that the situation is not different when it comes to relations with the US.
That's very clear. Those words that he had in that address were deliberate.
Exactly.
We've also heard much about the European Union and the strength of the European Union, and yet we know that much of the EU's decision-making is paralysed. How did the minister level with that?
The relations with the United States were a big part of his speech, but at the same time, he also focused a lot on the relations within the EU, with the European Union, in a way that he didn't in previous speeches. He does this speech every year. We could compare it in a way to the US national security strategy, in the way that both are an outlier of the country's foreign policies for the upcoming 12 months. And it was interesting that he focused a lot on these relations in the European Union, sort of painting the EU as the biggest guarantor of peace and security for Poland and for Europe, not the United States.
Kazimierz Słyszak, thank you so much for your time. And here's what's also making news on Friday, the 27th of February. Volodymyr Zelensky says the next round of trilateral peace talks between Ukraine, Russia and the United States could be held in Abu Dhabi in early March, with work underway to move negotiations to a leaders' level. Pakistan has carried out strikes in Afghanistan, ramping up a confrontation that Islamabad is now calling an open war. And American and Iranian officials say, quote, significant progress has been made in high-stakes nuclear talks in Geneva amid Washington's threats to strike the Middle East. Right, it's time to head around the region, and this week our TVP World team was on the ground in Ukraine for the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. In fact, Don Arleth and Alex Cardier were on Maidan Square hosting a special edition of our flagship news programme, World News Tonight.
You were there in the early stages. You were there when these horrors were happening. What do you remember from that time?
Well, I remember going in, of course, after the liberation, amongst the first journalists to go there when it was deemed safe enough to show the world these atrocities. We started seeing these horrible scenes coming out of the city of bodies laying all over the streets, just straight up massacred by Russian troops as they fled the city. Now, after further investigations, we know there's several horrific stories of this, but the one thing was the notorious mass grave behind the church there. We saw the first bodies come out of the ground. And actually, Alex, that's what sold me as somebody who wanted to explore more in Ukraine and show the world what's happening. Because, you know, as a student of history, you learn about World War II. But what we saw in Bucha was, indescribable in many cases. And this is what pushed me to stay here in Ukraine and do some very extensive reporting and go to the Eastern Front.
While in the war-torn country, Alex Cardier spoke with Ihor Brusilo, a top aide to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Mr. Brusilo had a sober warning to the rest of Europe, a warning that no one is safe until Vladimir Putin is forced to retreat.
It's natural for people not to believe this war can come to their homes, rightly so. And God forbid it happens to any of the European countries. But the reason why it has not happened yet is that Ukraine is holding the ground.
Ukraine has also faced mounting pressure to hold a presidential election, something prohibited by martial law, with Donald Trump at one point claiming that Volodymyr Zelensky is using the conflict to cling to power. But despite a public spat between Zelensky and Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv told us a vote right now is not part of the solution.
To make elections during the war is a poison for the country. Can you imagine? We have huge challenge from outside, the Russian aggression. At the same time, to make political competition inside the country can destroy the country from inside. That's why I'm more than sure, first of all, stop the war. And after that, we can talk about election.
That's the big news. Here's what's trending, and it's time for a diplomatic sweet treat. Prince Polo chocolate wafers have been hugely popular in Iceland since the 1950s, so much so that when they run out, local newspapers write about it. That means when Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk was standing side by side with his Icelandic counterpart in Warsaw this week, he knew exactly what to do.
Prince Polo is still popular.
You brought this.
Yeah, it's special for you. One for the road.
So I grew up on this everywhere, like either in a car or in a cupboard. You always find like a Prince Polo somewhere.
Looking ahead now, and as we go to air tonight, Mark Carney is in India. That may seem like a simple exercise of diplomacy. He'll later visit Japan and Australia too. But this is Carney, the man at the centre of that Davos speech last month, the one that pushed for middle powers to rise up against hard power, and the Canadian Prime Minister leading a country that has faced souring relations with India, the world's most populous country. Canada, of course, has increasingly been regarded as the most European of non-European countries. So this is Carney putting much of what Radosław Sikorski is talking about in practice. Europe and its allies, especially in the face of Russia, cannot be taken for suckers. We've already seen that realisation dawn on leaders through the Brussels trade deal with New Delhi, or when you look at the line of European power brokers filing through the doors of Xi Jinping's Great Hall of the People in Beijing. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz among them in recent days, all while America attempts to vacuum up the Western Hemisphere. So watch out for Carney's trip, not for what happens now, but what will follow in the months ahead. And then answer one of two questions. Is this Donald Trump's grand plan, or his grave mistake? And that's the World Brief. I'm Dahmen. You can follow us on YouTube and wherever you get your news. I'll see you next week.